or the last weekend in July. So that might be another opportunity for you to see what other people have done in their homes to make them green. So why should we care about it? Well, the environmental impact right now, homes use quite a bit in terms of energy. And some of these energy costs are reported to be, the second largest after the initial expense of the home. So a lot of people will buy a home and then not really think about what it's going to cost to own that home. So you've got your insurance, you've got your cost to upkeep, your maintenance. And we do quite a bit of affordable housing work. And what we're finding is that the homes that are being put together for that market segment are actually outperforming some of these larger, big, expensive homes. Not because they're larger and more expensive, it's just they're not necessarily built to the same level of energy efficiency and we'll call it greenness, if you will. So we also have these rising energy costs coming in. We also have other environmental impacts. So space heating is one of your biggest. Water heating comes after that. Then you've got your lighting on down the line. A lot of these things here at the bottom are really more behavioral, but the ones that we typically measure when we do our assessments are pretty much all these things. The only thing we can't really assess are the others and computers and cooking, because, I don't know, some people like to eat out, some people like to cook every day. That's not us.
Computers is high.
Yeah, yeah. Other thing that we have in terms of impact is, back in the 1950s, your average floor area was about 1,000 square feet, and now, we're looking at homes in the 2,200 range. And actually, it's gotten even bigger. How many of you heard about the tiny house movement? All right. There's this really great tour going on. It's called the Proof is Possible tour, being conducted by a couple of friends of mine. They've actually built a tiny house. They just had a baby too. They're going across the country. It's like 26 different cities, and just showing how you can do a green tiny home, as well as all the strategies that that's personally not my, I don't know how well they're gonna, we'll see how they think about it when they get done. Other things green homes can reduce is energy use. That's the principal one. CO, water use, solid waste. A couple other things that impact the demand. We've got all these government initiatives now. We've got so many incentives, and I'll give you that website here in a moment. There's also heightened demand. People are starting to understand green. They're starting to actually look for it. Again, take a look at that green home building tour. Improvements in sustainable materials, and also health concerns. This is a big one. So in terms of government initiatives, this Desire USA, great resource. You can see what's been funded. It starts out nationally, but you can click on our state, and they'll go through all the things that are available. It could be anything from, ComEd giving you $500 for changing out your furnace or putting in insulation or windows. May not necessarily cover the cost of the entire cost of what it is that you're going to do, but it at least would be a good portion. Now, thinking in hindsight, we've got some pretty nasty old single pane windows. The cost to replace those may be $100 a piece, but if my heating bill is $300 a month, replacing those windows reduces my energy costs. They're going to pay for themselves in about a year or two. So those are the kinds of things that you need to take a look at in terms of return on investment. Of course, everyone here knows a little bit about green homes, right? Yeah, that's why you're here. Okay, so the top 3 benefits that were sussed out by Smart Market Report, this is a publication by McGraw-Hill. First and foremost, healthier place to live. And then, of course, lower operating costs. There's an average 18% savings on energy and water, and part of a more sustainable lifestyle. Sorry, I moved around. I should have warned you.
No, you're fine.
So in terms of health concerns, We have, school-age children being affected by where they live, by where they go to school. The productivity that is lost due to asthma, just outstanding. And then we also have these hypersensitivities to chemicals. My friend Kim here actually has gone through training to look at some of these chemicals and their potential impacts and ways to help manufacturers better report that information so that specifiers and buyers can make better informed decisions. So, green homes are healthy homes. And here's a good case study where tenants moved into this new green building and their asthma symptoms abated. This was a LEED project. It's one of the green programs that we work with. Tenant satisfaction. If you're only paying $30 a month for your heating and cooling bills, and that's pretty incredible. Now the benefits, of course, healthier, better indoor air quality, increased comfort. You can conserve water and energy. It's two big ones. Lower operating costs. Just environmentally responsible. And we saw some of the impacts that green homes can reduce. So now that we've made the case, let's talk about what's green home. I don't know where the Wi-Fi is, or the television antenna. Of course, those are pretty sustainable hybrids. You have to feed them grass, right? Yeah. Or well, there is kind of gas. Okay, now we don't need to go there. Or this. How many of you remember the Jetsons?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm kind of dating myself. So,
You're not the only one.
right. So those are basically the two perceptions, that you've got to live in the middle of nowhere, completely disconnected, no community, and you've got to be roughing it in order for it to be green. Or something spacey. But here's the reality. It looks like a normal home. It doesn't have to look crazy. It doesn't even have to have solar panels. But the problem is, not everyone defines it the same way. So you might, actually there's Builder F over here who, just gives you green paint and says it's a green home. Or bamboo floors. But, Builder A may say, I'm going to just focus on energy efficiency, healthy and safe. Most of the time, that's just code home. And now that the energy code is IECC 2015 here, so it's supposed to be that these new homes, as they're being built, are at this better level of performance. The problem with code homes is this little thing called catnip. It's the cheapest available technology, narrowly avoiding prosecution. Catnip. That's really what it is. And unfortunately, you'll get what Builder F is going to provide you here. But, Builder C may say, I'm going to look at durability. I'm going to look at making sure I put the flashing in correctly and have water going into my walls. Who remembers that whole Drive-It incident? Oh, yeah. Yeah, big problem there. Water efficiency, definitely a big thing in the Southwest. But you get these guys who are really focusing on trying to put out a good product and really making the effort. And unfortunately, because not all consumers are well educated, they'll be like, well, I'm going to pay $200,000 for this house, and it looks exactly like this one, but this one's $225,000. But you can't see what's in the walls. You can't see the equipment. You can't see, what actually went into that house that's a little bit more expensive than this cheaper one. This one might cost you $100 a month to heat and cool. This one's probably going to be $300. And your kids might end up with more asthma, and there could be all sorts of other problems. So how should we define it? Well, that organization I talked about, U.S. Green Building Council, worked with a bunch of other industry stakeholders, and I came up with this definition where if something is green, it needs to look at like 5 spokes of the wheel. Site planning, how you're using your landscaping and sort of thing, water management, energy, materials, indoor air quality. Most people just focus on this material and this energy part. They don't really look at the other aspects of green. And lately, they've added project planning and education to really round this out. And, you know, planning's important. How should I build this house? Should I buy an old house, renovate? You know, do I need to have a third-party verifier? I can tell you right now that many municipalities require what's called a blower door test. I've got a picture of it later on. And that's third-party verification. That means it's someone who's not the builder coming in and verifying that, yes, the house is built to code or this special energy rating or this special green program. You know, sitting down with your builder and your verifier, trying to plan your project. But part of the reason you sit down and do a plan is, what can I do that doesn't cost me anything? I can plant trees that shade my house. Well, many places where we work, the city requires that you do some kind of landscaping. So plant smart. You've got to do it anyway, right? You know, some green features have resultant cost savings. You're reducing the construction waste by reducing the amount of materials you're putting in the house, because you're thinking about it ahead of time. Looking at solar hot water heating. Now, that Desire USA site might actually have some incentives available for you to do that. Something you could actually put on your house now. Site planning, you know, thinking about what types of plants are native in this area. One of the programs we service, they actually prohibit any kind of invasive, when we say invasive plants, it's like kudzu vine. I'm probably not saying that right. My husband's from Georgia, it's kudzu or something like that. But it's an invasive plant that basically has taken over and is now starting to drive out, you know, indigenous vegetation or you know, vegetation in the area. And the watering needs are different. So, for instance, if you're planting flowers and things that are more geared towards Illinois and the prairie type biome, they're not going to need as much water. They're not going to need as much care as, say, you know, I don't know, some crazy hawthorn tree from, take your pick. But really thinking about, you know, what kind of effort you're putting into your site. You know, what other things can I do that would reduce the effect of insects? Just some things to think about there. Some projects don't plant or put their new landscaping right up against the house, because it just makes it really easy for insects to get into your house. Water management. You know, maybe you can capture some rainwater for irrigation. There's rain barrels now all over the place. You can go to Home Depot and get them. Are there other landscaping techniques that you can use to reduce potable water? Well, the invasive plants, that's a perfect example. Reducing the amount of lawn that you have. And lawns are water intensive, or if you like your lawn, plant a species that doesn't require as much water. And this is my favorite one. Do you really need 4 heads in the shower? Maybe. Not saying you can't, but as far as the energy management portion comes, these are the things that I was talking about earlier that you can't really see. You can't see the insulation. You don't know if it's installed right. We have this thing called an infrared camera, and we can see where sometimes the insulation has dropped in the wall. So normally what we like to see is a nice uniform color, but when there's dark squares at the top, that tells us that the insulation has slumped inside the wall cavity, which means it's not doing its job, which means your furnace has to work harder, which means now you've got condensation in that wall and mold growing in it. Scary stuff. Air infiltration in windows. I mean, windows, you can't tell if these are high-performing windows or not. How do you know? The air infiltration that we're talking about there, the biggest enemy in homes is air infiltration. Part of the reason that homes in the past didn't have these issues with ventilation and mold and moisture is because they basically were so leaky, there wasn't time for moisture to condense. And when I say condense, think about, it's really hot in the summertime, and you've got that cold glass of iced tea or lemonade, and this water film forms on the outside of it. That's because the air is humid, and because the temperatures are so drastic, this cold surface gets water forming on it. That's what happens in your walls if they're not properly air sealed. Perfect example, we did a renovation for this family in Downers Grove where the wife wanted the husband to be able to stay at home, for end-of-life care. And when we pulled back the baseboards, there was mold growing on the drywall because what had happened is that sill where the wall hits the floor wasn't sealed properly, so this cold air was coming in, condensing, and mold needs food, water, and air. And it had the perfect condition because of that air infiltration. Other items, heating and cooling, you're going with high efficient furnace and air conditioner, same with the water heating. Lighting and appliances, now that LED is really starting to come down, I mean personally this is my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do this. I don't care for the fluorescent lighting for actually three reasons. First and foremost is it's got mercury in it and the disposal of it it's hazardous material. The second is the color rendition.
About the curvy ones?
Yeah, well, even these.
They are classified as hazardous waste now. You can't just throw them in the dumpster. You're not supposed to just throw them in the dumpster in your garbage can. You have to dispose of at the local recycling center or fire department, whoever.
Okay, because I have a few of them, I don't know where to take them.
Yeah, and they won't.
You can go to Home Depot, I'm sorry to interrupt. You go to Home Depot for the long ones, like these fixtures here.
Oh.
The long skinny ones, they recycle those for you. You take those there. The little screw-in balls, they don't take
And many of them won't take them when they're broken because that means the mercury is always released.
Right.
And I said color rendition is another one. I mean, this is kind of harsh on the eyes. And the last is EMF. This is starting to be something that we're taking a harder look at, is electromagnetic frequencies and radiation and how they could possibly affect people. And that's what those fluorescent fixtures actually generate. So that's why we've been moving towards LED, and we've been experimenting with different brands just to see if the color rendition is there. Definitely the energy savings is there, but just some things to consider. Again, that's my personal preference. The reason I have renewable energy last, is because so many people associate a green home with solar panels and that you have to have solar panels, and no, it's not the case. That's why, in terms of the most important to the least important, this would be my #1 item. Because think about it, your walls, once they're sealed up, it's really hard to change the insulation later. So if you're going to do it right the first time. Windows, a little harder to change, but you can do it. Same with the equipment, water heating, lighting, and appliances, and so on and so forth. I have some clients that are like, I gotta have my granite countertops. Well, think about it. Granite countertops aren't necessarily going to pay for themselves over time, but an upgraded insulation will. So what would you rather be paying for in your mortgage? Something that'll eventually pay for itself, or you have to make that decision yourself, but that's how we approach it. This is a project that actually has windmills on the top. A little spacey, but it is an option. I talked about that blower door test, which is now required in many municipalities. That's where they come in and see how leaky your house actually is. And there's this thing called the HERS index, and it's from 0 to 100, with 100 being the code home, and that's the worst. Kind of think of it as golf. The lower the score, the better. We've actually encountered homes that are in the negative range. Can anyone guess as to why they'd be in negative HERS?
Because they generate more energy than they use.
Exactly. So some of these homes, they build it so nice and tight, it's so energy efficient, then they throw solar panels on it, and it actually ends up being a negative score, which Not a bad negative, but a good negative. I know that sounds kind of crazy. How are we doing on time? And material use, this is what everyone talks about. You know, flooring. You know, should I use something with recycled content? Hey, that newly painted smell, not a good thing. Hey, I'm going to be taking apart some pieces of my house. What can I do with it? There's this really great organization called the Rebuilding Exchange that'll take donated materials. They might even come out and get them depending on where you're located. So instead of throwing them away, if you're taking out cabinets, donate them. I think Restore, too. Habitat for Humanity has a Restore that'll do that. And then indoor environmental quality. Oh, I love pollen, right? You know, this is a critical one for green homes. Many people like those fireplaces that are wide open, you know, the wood-burning fireplaces. I have nothing against that. I love them too. Can anyone think of why sealed ones would be better than open ones? Any thoughts?
Less air leakage.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's an A number one, yeah. Well, what are the products typically of combustion? You know, when you're burning something, you get
Fuel.
you get like carbon monoxide and all sorts of goodies. Yeah. Yep. So it's one of the reasons why in many of the green home building programs that we certify that sealed fireplaces are required. How important is ventilation and exhaust? Actually, part of the code is if we do a blower door on your house with this crazy contraption, and it basically is so tight that it's below what's called 3 ACH 50, which means 3 air changes per hour at a certain pressure. If it's that tight, you have to have what's called mechanical ventilation. That means you have to have some way for your house to breathe. And that's not leaving a window open, and that's not, you know, cutting a hole in the wall. That's actually taking a look at ways that you can get ventilation in the house, either through what's called a ERV, where it kind of tempers the air as it comes in, or you can use your furnace with some type of special air cycler. I don't want to get into too much detail, but you definitely have to make sure that your house is breathing. And the reason is, even though you might have a green home, there's still that potential that you get stuff in the house that isn't healthy. I mean, I don't know about you, but Mom was right about taking the shoes off when you come in the door. So you're bringing a lot of stuff on the bottoms of your shoes. And I like to tell the story of waking up in the middle of the night thinking I'm stepping on a piece of glass, but it was really a piece of rock salt that came off somebody's shoe. Yeah. And your kids and your pets, and just crazy. Other things that people are now considering is not attaching the garage, because that's another source of pollutants. And there are actually groups out there that will test your home too, just to make sure that the indoor air quality is not an issue. Any questions so far? You guys have been.
Well, I just want to ask, I've been in my home since 1965 in Westmont, and I was like, there's only 3, I think, houses on our block. We have hot water heat, we have a boiler, and I don't have ductwork. So all my children, they haven't, you know, weren't sick that much. And I did replace it once, the boiler. But the hot water heat is even, there's no dust flying around. And I don't know, I think that kids want me to move, but if I had to move, where can I find a house like that with hot water heat? And radiant heat in the basement.
Oh, believe it or not,
Yeah.
many new home builders are moving back towards that direction,
Oh,
using radiant heat.
yeah.
And the neat thing about radiant heat, which I know is a little off topic, but that's fine, it doesn't care what you hook up to it. The cost is running the pipe work and getting that
Yeah.
installed,
Yeah.
but you could hook a boiler up to it,
Mhm.
you could hook a heat pump to it, you could do solar thermal, meaning you could have not only solar panels that generate electricity, but ones that generate hot water. So like I said, the system doesn't care what you hook up to it. And we've had some clients that they'll start out with the boiler, and then when they can afford it and the incentive comes back, they'll get the solar panels. So,
Laureen, can you explain the HERS test a little bit?
yeah, that's this guy. So basically, we do this thing called the blower door, this checking to see how leaky the house is, but we also look at, let me just go flip back. We look at the type of insulation that was installed, your windows, this air infiltration, that's what we're testing for with that blower door. We get the information on your heating and cooling, what kind of water heater you have, how efficient it is, your lighting and appliances, and then of course if you've got any solar panels, and we put it in our little software program, and that generates this score. So, for instance, the new code allows a path of compliance, basically saying if you get a 55, which is right there, then your home would be considered passing code. The neat thing about doing it that way, it's called performance. There's two ways to go about building a house. You can do it either by performance, but the HERS index is kind of like the miles per gallon that you put on your car. And it says, or those little yellow stickers, the Energy Star stickers that says, hey, it's going to cost this much to operate this refrigerator, whatever it is. And the prescriptive just is a list of, okay, I put in R49 in my ceiling. I put in windows that are this type. I did this and this and this. But you really don't know how that's going to perform. And so that's the nice thing about the HERS index is it goes through and gives you an estimate of what your potential energy usage will be as well as your potential cost. Now, the nice thing about the reports that we generate from this, one of our clients was actually able to get an additional $10,000 of financing because the lender looked at it and said, wow, your cost of home ownership on a monthly basis is going to be considerably less. So because you have this additional cash flow, I can give you a larger loan. Crazy, huh? So that's why this person can afford the $225,000 house versus this one, with the 200. Now that 225, that is just, a round number. I'm not saying that's what it'll cost. It's just, on average, green homes run about 9 to 10% more at the most. And we've seen it being less. It just depends on that planning process and how important that is, having that done beforehand, and ways to do green homes as inexpensively as possible.
So can you explain what the baseline is again? So
Yeah.
55 is the new code, right?
Right. The baseline is 100. Energy Star was 70. And now Energy Star is looking to push, things lower than 70. Average LEED certified homes fall in this range as well. Has anyone heard of the 2030 Challenge program? This is something a bunch of crazy architects came up with, just kidding, where they're trying to reduce footprints of homes. So that's what this is here, where they have their own targets of where they would like to see all homes being at the zero marker. And this is also the new program that the EPA has come up with. It's called the Net Zero Energy Home. But everyone's trying to go zero. There's also some, like we said, we've got this water tool that we're looking at where we're trying to have zero water too. And we've been working with this one architect who's trying to do what's called a double zero home. It's really super energy efficient, but because he lives in Arizona and can't drill a well, the water gets trucked in like once a year, and they figure out a way to recycle every last drop. It's crazy. It's crazy. But thank goodness we don't have that extreme here, right?
I had a question on
Yeah.
that too. A couple of years ago, NICOR came out to my house to do the blower door and the analysis and all of that
Mhm.
stuff on my home. But when they got there, they said they couldn't do the blower door because there wasn't a big enough temperature differential. And so I was wondering, when is the best time of year to get this done? Or have things changed in the last couple of years?
No, blower doors can be done at any time. I think the analysis does require temperature differential, at least 10 degrees. We like it to be 15. And so wintertime is a good time to do it, but I don't like sliding around in my boots in snow. Spring is good, but closer to the earlier parts of the day. We have done it in the summer, but we've had to get there literally right as the sun was coming up, and had them run the air conditioners. We've had them run furnaces depending on the time of year in order to get that temperature differential. Because otherwise, you're not really going to see enough when you're using the infrared camera as to where the problems might actually be.
But you're talking about the insulation, right?
Well, you use the blower door with the infrared camera because that's where, when the infiltration happens, we call this, or air leakage.
Right, he was looking for leaks.
Right.
He was going to be looking for leaks.
You're going to be looking for leaks. There's other ways to do diagnostics with the blower door. First, of course, we figure out the volume of the home, we run the test, and then that tells us how many air changes per hour. Older homes, we've tested as high as 16. Newer homes, we've been in like the 2.5 range. There's this thing called Passive House, which is a crazy, insane program from Germany, which we now have in the United States. And their requirement is to be 0.6, really tight. It's just amazing. So the blower door can be used to test for that, but it can also be used with the infrared camera to see where there's issues. And that's why they were saying they couldn't do a true diagnostic. Just, again, you gotta have that temperature differential in order, and you do use the blower door just to find out where the leaks are and where the insulation problems are. That's really just the best way you can get what we call X-ray. It's not a true X-ray, but
So this is the best time of year to do it, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
right now or later in the fall?
probably about now would be good to do it, because we've got 28 degrees in the evening and the day is getting up to 58, so there's the potential to have. In fact, with it being 28 degrees, you could probably run your furnace on high in the morning, not cook yourself, but get enough of a temperature differential that their test would be able to work. Now, they could find the leaks with a smoke pencil or theatrical smoke, so they'll run the blower door and they go around with a pencil. They can test to see where the leak is. But the main thing about the temperature differential, again, is to be able to see inside the wall. I mean, you're not really going to see like an X-ray, but you'll see where there's problems, like insulation might have not have been installed right. The last thing about the education, how do you care for your home? Work with any kind of builder. Make sure that they give you all the information on how to take care of all the features that they've given you. Get an owner's manual. Hey, important to monitor the performance of your home. If your energy bill, let's say your water bill suddenly skyrockets, probably got a leak. So watch those bills. The only problem with water bills and energy bills in general is it's always the month after the problem arises. So that's why having some type of day meter, if you will, that will let you know if there's a problem. So if you have can't think of the way to explain this without using a technical term, but
It's a technical term.
yeah, I don't want to say smart meter, but it's like a daily use monitor, if you will, or data logger. And it'll be able to tell you where you are with your water, where you are with your energy, and you'd be able to see it real time instead of having to wait for the bill. Let's see, other ways to be green. We touch on a few. I'm going to pop through these examples. I think I've got 5 minutes. Real quick? Okay. So, anatomy of a green home. We talked about high quality insulation in the ceiling. Other things you can do, roof overhangs that help shade the windows. Trying to think what else. Properly sized mechanicals. So this is a good one. If your air conditioning is oversized, it won't run long enough to get the humidity out of the house. And so we joke that some contractors, they cut out a little house and a piece of paper and go, yeah, it looks like about a three-ton unit. Or, hey, I am going to take the calculations and I'm going to manipulate them just a tiny bit with the temperature, and that way it fits the unit that's in my warehouse. So I have to move it. And then there's problems because, yeah, to be honest, if a furnace isn't properly maintained, instead of being forced air, it's forced dust, to your point earlier. And in fact, I think I have an example. I'll go real quick. Here's one where they used spray foam in order for the attic to become usable space. And the neat thing is, they had ductwork up there that before wasn't insulated, but now it's no longer a problem because that attic is now conditioned space. It means it's also being heated and cooled the same as the rest of the house. Whereas before, when you had unprotected leaky ducts up in the attic, all your heat was going up in the attic. So I don't know if you've ever noticed in the wintertime, you'll drive by some of these houses where, hey, there's nice uniform snow. That means that the attic's properly insulated and air sealed. But then you might notice this house where, hey, there's stripes on the roof. Why is that? Because they're probably losing a lot of their hot air up into the attic. Or even worse, the exhaust fan isn't ducted to the outside, and they're just dumping this warm, moist air up in the attic. And we've seen that. That's pretty scary stuff.
It's like, if you Google something in the same vein with Laureen as far as working with her, but you can Google infrared photos of, like, not necessarily your neighborhood, but they have,
Oh, yeah.
they're on there, and you can look at a subdivision or a neighborhood, and probably 95 out of 100 of those houses are glowing orange or yellow. The roofs are,
Yeah.
because that's how much leakage or heat loss there is to the roof, versus a couple of them that are actually done correctly or have been retrofitted. So it's really, really amazing to see how much the energy is actually being lost through just normal houses.
So here's a planning idea, stacking all your plumbing so that you're not having to wait 5 minutes for hot water.
Excuse me.
Did that cost anything? No, just lay out your house different. I talked about that gasket, how important that is, make sure it's air sealed. That's one of the junctures. Another thing we've seen is that some of these new houses aren't putting now they have to, it's code, but they weren't putting insulation underneath the slab in the basement. Just crazy, because what's the normal temperature of the earth or the ground, that far down?
55.
Bingo. What do you think the temperature of that slab is year-round?
55.
And if it's hot and moist and muggy in the house, where's all the water going to condense? On the slab. And we found a house where they had carpet installed. When you picked up that carpet, oh my gosh, the whole thing was moldy underneath. It was just disgusting. Other things that don't cost are low cost. Reducing the amount of framing. Some of the things that are now being done are putting the insulation on the outside and in the wall. And when you put it on the outside like this, you create what's called a thermal break. It's so that every time that you have a stud or a roof rafter, like we were talking about, you're driving by and you're, hey, why is there stripes on my neighbor's roof? The heat and cold is transferring, but when you put insulation over it, you've created a break. So now it can't do a direct transfer. And definitely this is one of the strategies we're seeing much more of. Now, if you have an existing home, what you can do is, if you have to replace your siding for whatever reason, while you're doing it, put in a sheet of insulation, just an inch. It would do a world of good, plus it'll give you the opportunity to do some probably much needed air sealing, for that matter. Hey, look at that. Beautiful air sealing. I don't think that baseboard's going to get any mold behind it. Nice, huh? And then, of course, making sure that if you have any outlet boxes on an exterior wall, that they're well sealed too. I'm not necessarily advocating triple pane windows. This is one of the programs that Passive House, they use triple pane windows. There's a law of diminishing returns. So basically, if you go from single pane to double pane, that's a pretty good chunk of change, but it is a great return on investment. But then the curve kind of goes up in the triple pane. You really have to look at it. Nowadays, because the demand is starting to increase, the price should be coming down. I don't know when you plan on building your house, but hey, maybe by then, it'll be really, really cost effective.
Isn't there a cost of diminishing returns on thickness of insulation also?
Yeah, there is. Well, Passive House, well, here's the thing. On Passive House, they do quite a bit of this cellulose, blown-in cellulose. On average, it's about 3 to 4 R value, that's resistance per inch. Where some of the, like the spray foam I showed you in that attic, can be as high as 6.7, but it's more expensive. So when you're sitting down and doing your planning, because planning is important, and I do that first, you really need to compare the two. Personally, I like a combination of foam with the cellulose, partly because if you're working with a contractor that's really unskilled, and we've done that quite a bit, that never happens.
They're skilled ones?
Actually, well, a lot of the green contractors we work with have their act together. But the spray foam then acts as an air barrier. So it covers a multitude of sins and issues that if you're doing conventional fiberglass, which I don't like fiberglass for that matter. Fiberglass is a glorified air filter. I've seen them jam fiberglass in between the window frame and the rough framing. There's typically some structure around the window before you put it in. There's like this little gap. What should be in there is air sealing, so either caulk or spray foam, not fiberglass. So if you are living in an old home and you take back that trim around the window and you see that fiberglass is filthy, that's because air is coming in there and it's just acting as a glorified filter. But back to your original question, yeah, you really have to look at it. Some projects do combination of, they'll do cellulose in the walls and they'll do spray foam in the ceiling or something like that.
How do you feel about the rock wool?
That's another good product. We've got a couple projects that are using it.
Do you have any experience with lamb's wool insulation?
No, but I do have experience with blue jean insulation.
Wow.
Recycled blue jeans, yeah.
Wow. Does it work?
Yeah, it does. Just don't let it get wet. Because any insulation that gets wet loses its effectiveness. And even though it's treated with the borate, maybe over time it has that potential to attract insects. Or I'm not saying as machines, so like your car, if the oil isn't taken care of, then a whole host of other things can happen. Your engine can blow up. Yeah, my husband's shaking his head.
If you don't put any oil in at all, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
But there could, one little thing, if you screw with it here, could affect something else. So let's say you don't do proper air sealing. You spent all this great money on blue jean insulation or cellulose insulation, but because you didn't properly air seal the wall, now you've got water getting in there and all sorts of other problems. So that's why that planning, pre-planning is really important, just to kind of think about, okay, if I do this, then I've got to do this. And here's my next step here.
And it never ends.
What's that?
And it never ends.
Oh, it does. It does. Especially when you've got a budget and a time constraint. I talked about this, the furnaces that we've started to see, and instead of being what's called a constant volume, it's like either all on or it's off. New furnaces are now coming out with their variable speeds. And so some of the houses are using these variable speed furnaces for their ventilation. So it runs constantly at its lowest setting, but then when there's a demand for heating or cooling, it ramps up. And they can actually zone the house. And so let's say the bedrooms upstairs are occupied during the day. So the furnace knows not to ramp up. So maybe it's at the mid-range, but during the evening, when everyone's home, then it's not at its highest rate in order to accommodate everything. Yeah, things are getting smarter. And we talked about improvements in products. Can't talk about green without talking about materials, right? This particular project, they used flooring made from furniture scraps. So the furniture scraps were all recycled into this. It actually turned out great. I apologize, the picture isn't the greatest. The other thing that they were able to do in this particular project, it didn't cost them any more to have recycled content in the drywall. It's kind of cool, you know, making a statement in sustainability. We've worked with other projects where they had to take out trees because it had never on the dashboard. And so instead of turning the trees into mulch, which is the lowest use, you want to try and strive for the highest, best use, right? So, you know, let's say hypothetically you're taking cabinets out, wouldn't it be better to use them as cabinets again? Rather than just shredding them, throwing them away, or putting them in the landfill? So the same thing with the tree. Trees were taken down. We found a sawyer that would rough saw them, and we found a mill worker that would take them. He turned them into flooring. And the leftover wood that we couldn't use, we donated to a high school. So the homeowner got to use his own wood. He only had to pay for the labor and transportation. And he got a tax write-off for donating the wood that he didn't need. So, talked about cabinetry. Now thinking a little bit harder about the stuff that you're putting in your house. You're building a super sealed home, and you're bringing in things that have formaldehyde. Nowhere to go except in your lungs and absorb into your body. Everyone knows about low VOC paints. Probably heard that a million times. And I talked earlier about sealed combustion. There's a sealed fireplace that they had in this project. Believe it or not, I had a project where they installed IKEA cabinets. I had to scour the bowels of the internet for their environmental statement on their cabinet. I'm like, I wrote them, why don't you shout this from the rooftops? This is cool that you guys actually are, you know, going formaldehyde free in your products and stuff. I'm not saying that it's always like that. Who knows now? But at the time I was doing the research. This was about 3 years ago. Like, why don't you make it more prominent? Because they didn't really think it was that important. But when you're doing a green project, and that's your motivation. But talked a little bit about the ERVs. This is one of those systems where the fresh air will come in from the outside, but as it's coming in to the house, the exhaust, so this is a balance system, the exhaust will go through, and whether it's a summer or winter, the energy will be transferred to that air. So instead of, let's say in the wintertime, having negative 10-degree air coming in that your furnace has to work extra hard to get up to temperature, maybe it's only 20 degrees. You know, or maybe it's 30. I mean, negative 10 is a pretty cold day. But at least you're basically trying to scoop up every little bit of energy that you possibly can. Another thing that's important, especially if indoor air quality is one of your hot button issues, is having good filtration. Got news for you: if your furnace has one of those old paper filters and it's not quite fitting in right, and it's really leaky, that's another place where your furnace has to work really hard, because it's not necessarily, you know, using the ductwork the way it should, if that makes sense. So, consumer benefits. If you think about third-party verification being a part of a green home, it's kind of important. I definitely would recommend it, at least, you know, now with the code requiring the blower door testing. Some of the code officials are actually being trained in energy inspections. That's what my husband and I do for some cities. And we go through and look for these windows, and we look for the insulation to be installed right, and the air infiltration to be, you know, abated. You know, it's kind of up to you. If you have an existing home, it's a little bit tougher. There are organizations out there that can do an analysis of your home. Actually the major one is BPI, Building Performance Institute. You could just go to their website and find someone who does audits of existing homes. And what they'll do is they'll come and test. In fact, the lady back there in the Chicago sweatshirt was probably having an audit. They should do the testing and then give you a list of recommendations of things that could help improve, you know, the performance of your home. Things I didn't really touch on, but the lower home insurance and the higher home value, in theory, because a green home is focusing on durability, making sure you're not getting, like the drive it, getting water in the walls. I can't imagine how costly that was for the homeowners insurance companies. A lot of them, I think, would belly up. By having a more durable home, in theory, you shouldn't have these issues. By also educating your homeowner on how to maintain their home, again, you shouldn't have these issues. And there are some companies that will give a reduced rate on the insurance premiums for homes that are built green. Just have to do your research. And we've seen evidence of higher home value. Some of these green homes sell like you wouldn't believe. We built we did a gut rehab of a townhome in Romeoville, and I think it was sold in what, 30 days? Less than 30 days?
Less than 30 days.
Yeah. So, pretty amazing stuff.
And another benefit from that, if you live in a neighborhood like that, was that all the other property values in that same subdivision went up about 10% because of that. So it benefits everybody as far as those kind of programs like that too.
And a couple quick resources here. USGBC already mentioned. EnergyStar.gov, they have some great resources, things that, if you want to do research on your own on how to seal your house. If you're looking at your entry door and you can see daylight, that's not a good thing. There's some weather stripping you can do, all sorts of things. NAHB is another, National Association of Home Builders, they have some good resources. Lead for Homes, Illinois, I think these two might have changed their websites recently, so I'll have to look that up. ResNet is the Residential Energy Services Network. So I'm a part of that group that does audits, but mainly for new homes. My husband's with the BPI group that does the audits for existing. In theory, we can do crossover, but I like the White Sox, he likes the Cardinals. But. There's also the Regreen program. This is something that USGBC rolled out many years ago. I don't know if it's still live, but just Google it. It's got this really great, 100, 200 page resource of all these little things you can do to green your home, especially if you're in an existing situation, like, oh, here's this, you can change out your light bulbs, or here's this, you can, paint the walls with low VOC paint. I'm just kidding. Or, hey, you can maintain the filter on your furnace. And then the Green Home Guide's another good forum if you have questions. Sometimes if you search what's the best insulation, that might be a good resource. There's also another one, it's Green Home Guide, no, Green Building Advisor, possibly. I'd start with the Green Home Guide and see if you can get to their FAQ. There's a forum that might be able to have questions that have already been answered. So, well, we've taken some questions throughout. Did you have any other ones?
So if you have an existing home, what would you say would be the top 3 strategies to implement regarding energy savings and water conservation?
Okay. First one is to see how leaky your house is. The second one is to make sure that your furnace is doing what it's supposed to be doing. We have done some pro bono work for a group called Family Shelter Service, and they help victims of domestic violence. And they had an old home that they were using, I can't tell you exactly where, but we did an audit, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with this one duct run. When we actually cambered it, it had been crushed. And we think what happened is someone was walking around in the attic, and because it was covered with insulation, they didn't know it was there, and they stepped on it. So you had all this air just dumping up into the attic, and that's why, a couple of the bedrooms were always cold. Trying to think. So furnace, what else? Second one is your water heater. Take a look at that. A lot of the old water heaters, you'll see there's a gap between the flue and the water heater. If anything looks melted or burnt, that's dangerous. And part of the reason why I bring that out is people will do renovations of their kitchens, and they'll put in these ginormous 400 CFM exhaust fans, that basically suck all the doors in because it's such a strong exhaust. But what it'll do is it could create negative pressure. And so if you have, what those water heaters are called atmospheric. So basically they're relying on the convective nature, heat always rises, hot always goes to cold, And when you have a condition where it's negative pressure, it's just going to pull all that horrible products of combustion, which are carbon monoxide, mercury, there's so many things in the products of combustion. They just get sucked right back in the house. And that would be one of the telltale signs that we would look for. Of course, if we were to come out to your house, the first thing we would have is a carbon monoxide monitor on us to make sure that we're not walking into a problem. And if the alarm goes off right away, well, it's going to be like, open the doors and windows, guys, out you go, we're calling the fire department. And then, of course, we also check for